When translated, kaiju literally means strange creature or strange beast. Daikaiju adds the concept of largeness to this otherworldly creature. Pop culture has adopted the kaiju term since of course the Godzilla films, but also thanks to it being used most literally in Pacific Rim. It is a term with some leeway, whereas one could name Mechagodzilla a robot, a kaiju as well. Generally, it is something biological and otherworldly of a great size. And that's where I want to begin. Just what makes a great kaiju? The formula seems obvious. Big creature comes to a human populated area from somewhere and wreaks havoc, or potentially fights another monster that is there to wreak havoc. But obviously there is more nuance to it all than just that. Before we begin proper, I do want to say that there will be kaiju seen more here than others, and some not at all. That is just the way it goes. This video is sponsored by NordVPN. I'm a huge fan of Nord and believe wholeheartedly most should consider using a VPN. Get 75% off a 3-year plan at nordvpn.com/Rossitron, and for a short time use the code Rossitron to get an extra month of Nord for free. Thank you. Now, the origins of the kaiju as a cinematic beast can be defined pretty much with Godzilla in 1954. Coming a year after the beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and obviously 21 years after the original King Kong, one could argue against Godzilla being the true beginning pretty well. But for the sake of what is a very Japanese concept that started the genre as it is today, Godzilla is where we should begin. It set much of the structural framework and iconography for what a kaiju film would be considered in the future, and it is also a simply fantastic work. What really separates Godzilla from the American giant monster movies that preceded him are twofold: the subtext and suitmation. Now, of course, everything from Moby Dick to King Kong had meant something, but what Godzilla represented was incredibly important to who he is and how Japan felt at the time. And of course, suitmation affected everything from the performance of the creature to how it was filmed to the creators chosen to make the movie. The Revenge of Nature is an often seen kaiju-related story. These are ideas seen even most recently as part of Godzilla King of the Monsters, and its rather on-the-nose eco-plot. And then this happened. Godzilla became a kid-friendly figure of fun. Some like that. I myself, though, after the first film, am not a fan of much of the Showa era, and instead prefer the darker Heisei era that kept Big G at least somewhat villainous for much of its run. It is hard not to associate the kaiju with the person in a suit crashing around a miniature city image. If anything, the more physical the performance of a kaiju, and the more effort that goes into then making that physicality feel real without going too far into CGI, the more we forgive them. I think that is why Americanized versions get a somewhat harder time critically. There is a legacy in Japanese cinema for the kaiju. It is why the name chosen by many for them is that Japanese word. When watching a kaiju film made by any other nation, it will always be seen as borrowing from Japanese cinema. America has seemingly tried almost everything but suitmation outside of maybe, for example, the 70s King Kong to put its own stamp on kaiju cinema, but it never feels quite right without it. Even when using CGI for Shin Godzilla, the effects work was based on having it feel as much like the suitmation of old as possible. With the destruction wrought by the beast then being a physical thing, the miniatures themselves became important, and how they were filmed. It wasn't so much about the destruction, but about the scale and otherworldliness that was important. The best kaiju felt real, even when they were outlandish in their design. Godzilla's uncategorizable appearance. Is he a fire-breathing dragon? Is he a dinosaur? Is what makes him special. Something like Biollante, a favorite of mine, is similar. Her horrific appearance is one thing, but she is a mutated creation born from a flower, and the spirit of a young woman killed too early. Surprisingly for those who haven't seen it, Biollante is the good guy here, and an absolute gold standard in using suitmation to portray a strange beast. The point I am making here is that if the kaiju is rooted so much in the Japanese storytelling and subtext and the way the creatures are performed and filmed, then those aspects do factor into what makes a great kaiju. Really, the closest thing the American audiences have from the beginning, save for King Kong, to a kaiju-esque mythology, is with Cthulhu. An otherworldly, world-ending creature with a mysterious and terrifying heritage, often portrayed as being of a colossal scale. It is sad we have never seen that mythology brought to the big screen. Of course then, it is relevant to bring up Pacific Rim. A film created by Lovecraft megafan Guillermo del Toro, who has tried for years to get his own Lovecraft adaptation off the ground. With Pacific Rim, he succeeded in using American-friendly sensibilities to bring a very kaiju legacy-respecting story to the big screen. He nailed the scale and physicality of these beasts, even when using CGI. Look at just how much he depends on low angles to make the creatures here seem massive, and only cuts to long shots for short periods of time. When he wants to stay in the high angle frame for longer, he here has a helicopter fly in to maintain a sense of size, in case the longer take from up high threatens to lessen the feeling of scale. The next film, Uprising, is flatter and overlit and doesn't quite maintain that weighty quality.
How many buildings can this thing take?
Del Toro also understood that at least American audiences wanted to see monsters, not humans. The human characters here are given the amount of depth they need, but have their stories and emotional arcs always affected by kaiju. If we aren't seeing kaiju, we hear about kaiju. Does it make Pacific Rim a great film? No, though I do enjoy it as a silly blockbuster, but as a kaiju film, I cannot commend it enough. And that's an important thing to note. Compared to much of cinema, it is rare to get an actually great kaiju film. They should be compared to themselves more than to all of film history, to get a true sense of when one is good or not. And therein lies an important point to discuss. Many audiences derided Gareth Edwards', in my opinion, quite fantastic Godzilla film due to how much it focused on human characters over the monsters.
It's done feeding.
But then almost every Godzilla era and film, save for something perhaps like Final Wars, has focused on human characters more than anything. There are traditional Godzilla films where he appears for less time than in the 2014 film. For me, Edwards made, alongside Shin Godzilla, possibly one of the most effective kaiju on screen ever. He understood that Godzilla, a name rooted in American adaptation, means that, God. Where the Mutos elicit screams and panic from onlookers, he elicits awe. Godzilla, like all kaiju if they hope to be great, is to be respected like the god he is. And in the recent King of the Monsters, they tried so hard to correct what I feel were unfair criticisms with little merit that they produced something of a dud, and did so sadly when trying so hard to make something that would please the genre's biggest fans. Now I can understand that of course there is enough fighting here to please fans, and it isn't a terrible kaiju film, but it's often so over-edited and shaky and the monsters able to move so quickly in a story that moves with such pace, there is little sense of scale or majesty to these creatures. It fits the structure and feel, though a very Hollywood version, of those older Godzilla movies, but it had the potential to be so much more. And by paying so little attention to the humans, we ended up with nothing as powerful as, say, the Bryan Cranston Juliette Binoche story of the 2014 film. Now that is something else Edwards got right, and Shin Godzilla nailed. Sound. Even Pacific Rim had an incredible soundtrack. Sound and music is as integral to a kaiju as anything else. Without that distinct roar and that music, would Godzilla ever have had such menace? Would the miniatures around Gamera ever have felt real? Think about that moment in 2014 you first heard the powering up of Godzilla's atomic breath. That there was homage, respect, and power, all tied into one lingering shot and the sound pouring out from the speakers. So, what makes a great kaiju? Well, I've said it. Respect. Respect for the creature, respect for the legacy, respect for the audience. Scale, subtext, and yes, the humans of the story all matter too. These are otherworldly creatures, and so they need to exist in our world to be otherworldly. They need to be seen as mysterious by us and through the characters on screen. The wrath or indifference they wage upon our world only works when it is seen at a certain scale. And that scale is based on humankind, of the views from our streets and our helicopters. Cloverfield works so brilliantly for me, as it puts us at ground zero, allowing us this immediate feeling of being inside those miniatures we had seen so much of growing up. Making a great kaiju, or portraying an existing one with greatness, is hard. It is about looking at what was done, maintaining the horror and the mystery, keeping a sense of scale and wonder, and of course the design of the beast and how it is brought to the screen. Thinking about the kaiju along those lines, with respect, and not just as brawling monsters, will afford you the tools you need creatively to make something truly great. Thank you. Please remember to like and subscribe and hit the bell notification if you want to be notified of when I have a video out. That helps the channel immensely. Now, as someone who relies on the internet and data protection in almost everything I do, be it for work or entertainment, security online is of the utmost importance to me. Browsing without a VPN, especially on things like public Wi-Fi, is getting more and more dangerous. A VPN allows you to browse securely, and nobody does it better than NordVPN. As a freelancer now, who will be focusing on YouTube more, and working in coffee shops especially, it is without a doubt a necessity for me. You can now get 75% off a 3-year plan at nordvpn.com/Rossatron, that's ROSSATRON, which rather handily makes your subscription just $2.99 per month. And by using the code Rossatron, you get an extra month of Nord for free. Now that is good value. Thanks, and see you again soon.